"Stop it, Aminat. Stop it now." Asset Magamadova's voice quivered, teetering between exhaustion and despair. The small living room was in disarray, furniture shoved aside in the chaos of the moment. Across from her stood Aminat, her 14-year-old daughter, her face defiant, words sharp enough to cut through the air. Asset, a widow and refugee, had faced battles far worse than a defiant teenager, battles of war, displacement, and grief. But this confrontation was different. This wasn't a war waged by governments, it was one between a mother and her child. In the heart of Calgary, Alberta, far from the war-torn streets of Chechnya, Asset's struggle for survival had morphed into a different kind of conflict, one that would soon spiral into tragedy. Asset Magamadova and her children had come to Canada seeking refuge from violence. Asset was no stranger to adversity. She had navigated the labyrinth of war zones and displacement camps to get her children to safety. She wanted what every mother wanted, a chance for her kids to live without fear. But life in Calgary wasn't as peaceful as she had hoped. The scars of war followed them, manifesting in fractured relationships and emotional turmoil. Aminat, her eldest, bore the brunt of the struggle. At 14, she was rebellious, angry, and deeply troubled. For years, Aminat's defiance escalated. Skipping school, getting into trouble with the law, and lashing out at her mother became her way of coping. Asset, desperate to regain control, reached out for help: social workers, counselors, and police. None of it seemed to make a difference. By February 26, 2007, the tension in their modest Calgary apartment was a powder keg waiting to explode. That afternoon, Aminat's rage boiled over into physical violence. She charged at Asset, screaming accusations, her fists clenched. Asset tried to calm her, but Aminat's anger was relentless. The confrontation escalated quickly. Asset, in a moment of panic, grabbed a scarf, a symbol of her Chechen heritage and faith, and attempted to restrain her daughter. The scarf tightened as the struggle grew more desperate. Minutes later, the room fell silent. Aminat lay lifeless on the floor, her rebellion forever stilled. The police arrived at the apartment to find Asset sitting in stunned silence, cradling her daughter's body. She didn't resist as they placed her in handcuffs. The officers were met with a scene that was as heartbreaking as it was incomprehensible. Charged with second-degree murder, Asset's case quickly became a lightning rod for public opinion. Was she a grieving mother pushed to the edge, or a killer who let her frustrations take a deadly turn? Asset's trial began in 2010, and the courtroom became a battleground of narratives. The prosecution painted her as a woman who had let anger and control consume her. They argued that Aminat's death was not a tragic accident, but the deliberate act of a mother who had lost patience. The defense told a different story, that of a refugee mother trying to discipline a wayward child in a cultural context foreign to her. Asset's lawyer argued that she had acted in self-defense, using the scarf not to harm but to restrain her daughter during a volatile moment. Experts testified about Asset's traumatic past and the challenges of adapting to a new culture while raising troubled children. The courtroom heard of the horrors she had escaped and the unrelenting pressures she faced in her new life. But it was Asset's own testimony that left the deepest mark. Through tears, she recounted the struggles of motherhood in exile, her love for Aminat, and the regret that would haunt her forever. The jury's decision was not an easy one. After weeks of deliberation, they delivered their verdict: guilty of manslaughter, not murder. The ruling acknowledged the complexity of the case, recognizing Asset's intent was not to kill. At sentencing, the judge handed down a suspended sentence, sparing Asset from prison. He described the case as exceptional, citing her history of trauma, the cultural challenges she faced, and the tragic loss she had already endured. The decision sparked widespread debate. Some saw it as a compassionate acknowledgement of Asset's circumstances, while others viewed it as a miscarriage of justice. Following the trial, Asset's life was marked by quiet resilience. She lived with the weight of her actions, striving to rebuild in the shadow of an unthinkable tragedy. The case of Asset Magamadova remains a poignant reminder of the complexities of justice. It forces us to confront difficult questions about culture, accountability, and the limits of human endurance. For Asset, The battle wasn't just in the courtroom, it was within her heart, a mother's eternal struggle to reconcile love, loss, and survival. The courtroom had emptied, but the judgment lingered in the public's mind. Aset returned to a life that no longer resembled the one she had before that fateful day. Amanat's absence was a gaping void, her laughter and defiance now a distant memory. Her surviving son, Ahmed, who had been a quieter presence throughout their family's tribulations, became her anchor in a sea of regret and loneliness. For Ahmed, the loss of his sister and the public scrutiny of his mother created a quiet storm of his own. Friends turned into strangers, and whispers followed him through hallways and streets. At school, he was no longer just a student, he was the boy whose mother had taken a life. Aset retreated into herself, finding solace in prayer and routine. The small immigrant community that had once embraced her was now divided. Some rallied around her, citing her courage in hardships, while others distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the dark shadow her story cast. The case of Aset Magomadova ignited conversations far beyond her Calgary neighborhood. Media outlets across Canada debated the implications of her sentence. Was it too lenient? Or did it reflect an understanding of her unique circumstances? Cultural scholars and legal experts weighed in. Many noted the clash between Canadian laws and the Chechen norms Aset had grown up with. In her homeland, discipline was often strict, and family matters rarely involved authorities. In Canada, such actions could lead to severe legal consequences. The suspended sentence brought heated criticism from those who felt it undermined the sanctity of the law. What message does this send? One op-ed asked. That a parent can kill their child and walk free. But others pointed to the nuances of the case. Aset's background as a refugee who had suffered unimaginable trauma played a significant role in the judge's decision. Advocates argued that the justice system must adapt to the complexities of multicultural societies. Determined to honor Amanat's memory in her own way, Aset sought ways to contribute to her community. She began volunteering at organizations that supported at-risk youth and immigrant families, sharing her story as a cautionary tale. Through these efforts, she met other mothers who had faced similar struggles, women torn between their cultural heritage and the realities of raising children in a foreign land. These encounters became a source of healing for Aset. While she could never undo what had happened, she could try to prevent others from facing the same fate. Ahmed, too, found his path. Inspired by the challenges his family had faced, he pursued a career in social work. He wanted to help bridge the gap between cultures, ensuring that immigrant families received the support they needed before their struggles reached a breaking point. Years passed, but the questions raised by Aset's case remained unanswered. Could her tragedy have been prevented? Was her sentence a reflection of justice or a failure of the system? For Aset, closure was an illusion. The memory of Amanat haunted her dreams, a reminder of the delicate line between love and despair. She kept a small photo of her daughter by her bedside, a bittersweet memento of what had been lost. Aset Magomadova's story serves as a poignant case study in the intersection of culture, law, and humanity. It highlights the importance of understanding the struggles faced by immigrant families, struggles that often remain invisible until it is too late. Organizations across Canada began using her case as a training tool for social workers and legal professionals. Workshops emphasized the need for cultural sensitivity and proactive intervention in domestic disputes. But perhaps the most significant lesson came from Aset herself. Her journey, marked by resilience, regret, and redemption, was a testament to the strength of the human spirit. In the quiet of her home, Aset lit a candle every year on February 26th, marking the anniversary of Amanat's passing. It was not a celebration, nor a memorial, but a moment of reflection, a chance to remember her daughter not as a victim or a rebel, but simply as her child. The flame flickered softly, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is light to be found. Aset's work with immigrant families became a lifeline not just for others, but for herself. As she listened to the stories of mothers navigating their own cultural dilemmas, she began to see her experience as part of a larger, systemic issue. The isolation she had felt as a newcomer was echoed in countless voices: parents who struggled with language barriers, children caught between two cultures, and families pulled apart by misunderstandings. Aset resolved to be more than a symbol of tragedy. She wanted to be a force for change. She collaborated with local community leaders to create workshops for immigrant families. These sessions provided guidance on balancing cultural heritage with Canadian laws and expectations. Asset shared her story with humility, her voice trembling but unwavering. "You don't have to lose your culture," she would tell them, "but you must learn to live within the laws of this country. No one prepared me for that. I'm here to make sure you are." Her work earned her cautious respect from both the immigrant and broader Canadian communities. For many, she was proof that even in the wake of unimaginable loss, there could be redemption and purpose. The Magamadova case continued to influence Canadian society long after the headlines faded. Advocacy groups pushed for greater cultural sensitivity training for social workers, teachers, and law enforcement. Schools began offering workshops for immigrant parents, helping them navigate the challenges of raising children in a multicultural environment. Lawmakers also revisited policies related to domestic violence and child protection, striving to balance the enforcement of laws with an understanding of cultural nuances. The justice system, too, underwent introspection. Judges and lawyers debated the role of empathy in sentencing, questioning how far compassion should extend in cases involving extreme circumstances. The story of Asset Magamadova is one of tragedy, resilience, and transformation. It forced a society to confront its own limitations, to ask difficult questions about justice, and to find better ways to support its most vulnerable members. For Asset, it was a journey through darkness toward redemption, a testament to the strength of a mother's love, even when it falters, and the enduring hope for a better tomorrow.